So let us begin the class. So previous class we were talking about EC2, right? Just started off and unfortunately I had to cancel the class last week. Right. So any questions, right? Have you able to go through the FAQs or something like that on EC2? Okay. I think in the previous class we spoke about what are EC2 instances and what are the instance types that we have. And then we just saw some basic creating a instance. Okay, just saw some basic creating a instance. Okay, so we'll continue with this. Okay, so we'll go ahead. We will create an instance again, right? We're going to say launch instance, right? Then the first thing is what? The AMI that we are going to choose, right? I don't think we have spoken about what is an AMI, right? Have we discussed what is an AMI, guys? Just a quick question because I don't.
No.
Okay. So to create a EC2 instance, right? Previous class we just saw high level quickly how to create an instance, what is a virtual machine, all that stuff, right? To create this EC2 instance, which is your server, a virtual server, right? So what is required is something called an AMI. Okay. So what is an AMI? It stands for Amazon Machine Image. Okay. It is basically an OS image, or it basically has some OS plus some software. Okay. So so if you talk about traditionally, right, whether you have a virtual infrastructure or physical infrastructure, how do you get the virtual machine? You use a CD or a ISO image or something like that to install the OS, right? So here you don't use any CD or ISO image as such, right? You have a pre-built images available. So think of it like something, right? Suppose you take some company like HP or something, right? So they make a lot of laptops, right? They have different models. Let us say they have a laptop called something like 1341 or something, some model number, right? So it will have some specification, right? And it might come with the OS. Let us say it comes with Windows 10 OS. So they will have hundreds or thousands of these laptops manufactured, right, of the same model with the same specifications, same hardware and same software specifications. So anybody who buys this model number, they switch on the laptop, everybody gets the same standard of what do you say, the OS image, the software inside. Afterwards, you can install software, uninstall software, whatever the user wants, they can do. But by default, it comes with a pre-configured, pre-installed OS and maybe some other drivers and other software tools and other stuff, right? So everybody gets the same thing. All 1,000 laptops will be the same. The software also inside. So how are they able to install the software on so many machines? Are they going to manually put the CD on each machine and install? No. So what they will take one laptop with the same hardware, the model, right? And then what they will do, they will install everything on that, right? They will install the OS, patches, whatever the drivers required, and maybe additional software, right? And then what they will do after everything is installed, they will create an image. There are tools available to create an image, right? Like Acronis, Ghost, right? There are different tools available which lets you create a image. So what they will do is they will take this image and they will deploy this image on every other laptop, every laptop in the same the model, so that all laptops are in the same state. Because they have the same OS, patches, drivers, and everything, and probably they will save this image on a separate partition in your laptop called the recovery partition or something. So that if something happens, they will ask you to recover. Right? You say my OS is corrupt or something, laptop is slow. If you go to official support, they will say do the recovery. They will have some shortcut key to press that, and what will happen? It will go back to the factory state. How is it able to go back to the factory state? Because that image is stored in the recovery partition, or they will ask you to create a recovery CD or something like that, right? So basically what is happening, that image is being deployed again, and everything is coming back to whatever is the initial state, right? So similar concept in AWS, right? So they are providing you the image. You don't need to start off, right? You choose some image. So they have images for different things. Okay. So depending on what you need, you can choose some image from their catalog. Okay. So basically, it will have a minimum OS will be there. Plus, it may have some additional software. So say for example, you want a server with Windows and some software, right? You want Windows with SQL Server or something like that, right? So say it is not available, Windows with SQL is not available, then maybe you could take only Windows, and then later on you can install whatever software you want. Or if this combination that you want is already available, you can straight away go for it. But a lot of people, mostly they might start off with the bare OS, especially some commonly used stuff like SQL Server, Apache, MySQL, PHP, right? But some cases they might use an AMI which has all the software in it, right? So for example, if I go here, right, launch a instance, right, the first step is to choose an image. So here you have in the quick start some commonly used images. Mostly it will be the OS or OS maybe plus some software, right? You have Amazon Linux, which is the Linux flavor provided by Amazon, right? You have RHEL, you have SUSE, like this you will have lot, right? Ubuntu, Windows, right? Windows 2012, 2016, 2019, right? Different versions with different combinations. Here you see Windows Server 2019 base. Base means only the OS, right? Here you have base with containers with SQL Server 2017 standard, Enterprise 2019 standard. These are some quick starter, right? Uh, Something like that, right? 2016 base. So like this, you will have hundreds or thousands of images available, right? We have to know what we want. Do you want only the OS, or you want? So if you go to the marketplace, which is where third-party people can also sell their images, right? With their tools, their softwares pre-configured, right? All these are products, right? Trend Micro, Deep Security, these are all products. But if you click on this, right, I'll click and show, right? So all these are what you say, software, images, tools for different use cases. So they have all these categories, right? Suppose you are looking for a lamp stack, right? You are looking for a lamp stack. You can search something like this. So here you have a Linux machine, right? Based on some Linux OS, right? Here it's Debian, right? Which has these things already installed for you. Or you can just take the Linux OS and you can install these yourself, right? So basically what you want, you can search for it. It may be available, you can use it. If not, you can take the bare bones OS and you can do the installations yourself. Say here you have the WordPress, right? So instead of you installing, configuring the WordPress, it is already available out of the box on based on Ubuntu. The OS is Ubuntu 18.4, on which the WordPress is already installed and configured. You just have to deploy your content, right? So like this, they have a lot of images. We just have to know what is our requirement and search for it and pick up something which is closest to our requirement, right? If you go infrastructure software like this, right, you will have right, only the OS, right? So like this, you will have a lot of combinations. You can filter and search based on your requirement. So you are looking for some network related tools, right? Like firewalls. All these are available as a image based on some OS. So your image will have the OS, right? It will have the OS, plus it may have any other software or tools pre-configured. You can search for it and choose whatever is closest to your requirement, right? Okay, so I will start with Windows so that it is easy to understand, right? So I will start with Windows Server 2012, only the OS. Okay, and remember I told you you are eligible for free tier under T2 micro. Anything else you choose, it will cost you money. Same thing for the image. because the image, it usually includes the software license also. So make sure you are ideally choosing something which has free tier eligible specified over there. Otherwise, it might cost you money. Not that it will cost you. I don't think this 2012 will cost you money if you use it in the free tier, that is T2 micro. But to be safe, just make sure the OS also says free tier eligible. Free tier eligible means your instance type also should be T2 micro. If you choose anything else, it might cost you money, right? So I'm not going to choose T2 micro because it will be slightly slower, right? But yeah, so I will choose something like T3 small. Okay, so the image, you can choose any instance type. It is not that it is fixed to a particular instance type. It depends upon the architecture which you are choosing. So I'm choosing x86, means it is basically what do you say, Intel architecture, right? 64-bit. So here you will see some things with ARM and all that stuff, right? So if you choose ARM or something, then certain instance types will be grayed out, right? So here you see, using that Windows 2012 AMI 64-bit, I can launch any of these instance types except the grayed out ones. The grayed out ones, some of them will be Graviton processors. Their architecture is different hardware, right? So if it is grayed out, you can't use that instance type for that particular AMI, either because of the OS constraints or because of the underlying hardware architecture, or yeah. Okay, so I will choose T3 small, and then we have some configuration. So basically, where do you want to place the instance? Which subnet you want to place? All this we saw in the VPC, right? Which subnet do you want to place your instance, right? And which availability zone do you want to place your instance? You can specify that. If you don't specify, right, it will choose any subnet automatically, right? Then we saw auto. What is auto assign? Public IP. So your instance will get a dynamic public IP. Okay, so we'll keep all these things as such. We'll come back to these options also, right? A lot of these options we will see one by one. So some basic options we will see, right? So what is the shutdown behavior? By default it is stop. So what this is saying is, right, the behavior when you do a OS level shutdown. Normally what happens when you do a OS level shutdown, the machine is going to stop. You can start it again, but they have an option called terminate. If you keep this to terminate and you switch off your machine from inside the OS, right, then your machine will be terminated, it will not be stopped, right? For some reason you want to do that, you can do that, but you have to be careful. So this behavior applies only when you do it from inside the OS, not from the AWS end. Okay, I'll show you that. I'll keep this at default as stop, then we'll see the behavior, right? And then you have something called the termination protection. I'll also enable this and we'll see what this is. And then we saw this shared tenancy, right? What is shared, right? What is how your EC2 instance is placed. The other thing is you have the dedicated, right? Anybody able to find the difference between what is a dedicated instance and the dedicated host? I think in the previous class I told you, or we'll come back to it anyway, right? The default is going to be shared. That is, you share hardware with other customers, right? And then you have the network interface. I told you where you can specify your IP address. It should be within the subnet range. Otherwise, it will randomly assign some IP in that subnet range on DHCP, right? And then storage. Storage also we are going to see separately, but for now, I told you storage is coming from a service called EBS. So there is one volume of 30 GB in size, which is the root volume. Root volume is basically the volume which has the OS. So think of one volume as one drive, as one disk, not partition, as one physical hard drive. Think of it as something like that, right? It's of capacity 30 GB, right? And then we will go to the security groups, right? We'll create a security group, whatever, right? I'll open the RDP port so that I can connect to my machine because it's a Windows machine. I'm opening the RTP port and then review and launch. We have our Windows machine over here. Okay, so Windows machines will take a couple of minutes to launch. So meanwhile, we'll continue about this AMI. Okay, so in this case, what I said, I choose the OS as Windows Server 2012, only the OS, right? Base. Okay. So what I'm doing, we did the configuration, right? And then we specified some key, right? And then we said launch. When I said launch, your instance is created. Okay, so now a little bit more about this AMI. Okay, so your instance always it will mostly start from a AMI. Okay, so AMI can either be provided by Amazon, right? It can be provided from by some third party, right, in the marketplace, that is, right, or it can be from the community, that is basically a lot of open source stuff, and also it is also some of them are provided by Amazon or maybe some by third parties, right? Or you can provide the AMI. So what we did, because we didn't have any AMI, we started off with Windows Server 2012. Now let us say you want a server with Windows plus some software. Right? You want Windows 2012 plus some group of software for your standard. Right? Let me say I want the Notepad++ software. I want a server with Windows 2012 plus Notepad++. So what I will do, I will create the instance and then I will install this software. So now if I want 100 machines with the same configuration, so I'm not going to 100 times launch AMI with 2012 and again install Notepad on all the machines. So if this combination is not available, I will take only the OS, I will create an instance, right? And then what I will do, on this instance, I will install this, whatever the software I want, the configuration I want to do, I will do all that. And then I will say create image. So now what happens? I am creating an image. So the image which I create, what it will happen? It will happen. It will have the Windows 2012 plus the software and the configuration which I do. So this is your image. That is, other people cannot use it by default. It is private. So now you have an image, right, which has Windows Server 2012 with the required software that you want and the configuration that you want. So the next time somebody wants a server with this configuration, you choose this AMI. You cannot edit the AMI as such, right? You can only launch an AMI and you can create a new AMI with the specifications. Now let us say you don't want
And
this.
Siddharth, just a clarification. So is this similar to like a Docker container?
No. Container is
No, right?
a different concept, but maybe somewhat similar, you can say. I mean, it is an image.
Okay.
Like I said, it is in the
Okay.
same state. Like I said, HP, right? Laptop. So what they will do, they will install Windows, they will install the software, then they will take an image and keep it. So now, if
Okay.
you want to, if you want a server with the same configuration, then what you do, you use this image. So Docker container also is what you say. It is already pre-configured and kept whatever you want, right? Somewhat similar only, but it is not a container. It is a physical server, right? It is a actual, what do you say, full-fledged server. Okay.
Okay.
Right, so maybe you can say it is like Docker image. Image anywhere is what? It is just like your, think of it like a photo negative. In the old days, right? We had the photo negative, right? What is the negative? It is just a image. You can't use this as such. If you want to use this image, you have to print some copies, either passport size or large size, whatever. So this image is like this thing, right? You cannot go into this image and do anything. You can only create a instance, right? So you have this Windows plus the Notepad plus plus. So now your image has the same thing. So if you want to install more software, you can't go inside the AMI and install, right? You have to again create an instance. So say you start off with some AMI, right? 2012, right? You launch it, you get a EC2 instance, right, with Windows Server 2012. Then what you do, you install the Notepad++ software, you do some configuration. Let us say you install version 1 and you do some configuration. Then what you do, you will say create image. Then you do this, you get another image with 2012, the Notepad++ version 1 and your configuration, whatever you did. So now from here, if you launch an instance, you will get EC2 instance with the Notepad++ already installed on it, right? You will get a EC2 instance with the Notepad++ software and the configuration there. Now, if you want to upgrade this to version 2, you can't do it over here, right? You can't log into your image and do anything. You have to launch your instance, then you log into the machine, you uninstall this Notepad++ or you upgrade it to the version 2, or okay, we don't want Notepad++, we want another software, right? You do whatever configuration you want, like Notepad version 3, then again you say create image. So that image which is created again, it will have the Windows Server 2012, but now it will have the Notepad++ version 3 or something, right? So you go on doing like this, right? You cannot edit an image as in log into the image and edit. You need to create a machine, edit it, again say create image. So the new image which you create will have the same state as what was there in this machine. Okay. So we will do that and see how to create an image, all that stuff, right? So basically, you start off with something which is closest to your requirement, right? So we have this machine. So let us go and log into this machine. So the login and all, I'll show you how to log in and all that stuff, right? So okay, so we'll talk about the login also now itself. Okay, so we have used an AMI, we have launched a machine. So how do you log into the EC2 server? So there are a couple of ways, right? So we are using Windows, so we are going to use RDP if you want the GUI, right? We are going to use the remote desktop to log into the server. So what is required basically to log into any server, right? You need its IP address, you need the username, you need the password, and of course the port has to be open. That is security group. We saw in the VPC. So the port for RDP is 3389, and we have opened it while creating the machine, right? While specifying the security group, we have specified them, right? Here you have the inbound rules, right? Where I'm allowing 3389 from my IP. So the port is open, right? So the next thing is, what is the IP address? The IP address we know. Your instance has a private IP and a public IP. While launching, I specified, so I got a public IP also. Because I am coming from outside AWS, I cannot use the private IP, obviously, right? I cannot use the private IP. Private IP is for communication within your LAN or within the VPC, right? Because I don't have a VPN connection or anything, I cannot connect using the private IP, so I'm going to use the public IP, right? So I have the IP also. Then what is the username? What is the password? Right? The default, the username for Windows is going to be administrator. The default username for Windows is going to be administrator. If administrator is not working, then you have to check with the AMI provider. They will give you the details. Whoever gave you the AMI, if they have replaced the username or something, they will provide the details. When you're choosing the image, right, it will have the details usually. When you launch a machine, right, the default ones mostly it will be administrator, but certain AMIs, right, provided by certain third parties, they might have their own, what do you say, login credentials that you will get as an email, or when you choose a particular AMI, it will be there in the details or something like that. If it is different, if it is not specified, then you can try the default username. So like this, they will tell you what is there in the image, right, and all these things, right? It depends upon the provider. Okay, you will usually get a mail when you choose an image, something out of Amazon or provided by a third party. You will get a mail usually with certain details, right? If it is not using the default thing, then they will explicitly specify what is the username, what credentials to use. right? So basically the credentials they will specify. Otherwise for Windows, the default username is administrator. Then what is the password, right? So here again, the password also may be specified by the AMI provider. If it is not specified, then how do we get the password? So if you see while creating the instance, I didn't specify the password anywhere. Just in the last step, I said use key pair, right? Use key pair, right? So what is this key pair is? It is used for your authentication. Key pair, it contains a private key and a public key, right? Key pair means it is a pair of keys, private key and public key. So you can create the key pair over here. In AWS, you can go to key pairs and you can say create key pair, right? When you say create key pair, you can give your key pair some name, right? And let me just say something like demo Mumbai, right? You can give some name and you can say create. You can do it here, or while creating the instance, the last step it will ask you, do you want to use an existing key pair or create a new key pair? If you already have some keys, you can use it, or you can create a key pair in the last step also, right? So if you say create here, you will get the actual key file, right? It is going to be a small PEM file. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me copy this into my keys folder. So you have to keep this key safely, especially for the Linux machines. Okay, so for Windows, we are going to use the key pair to get the password. Okay, so we have the key. Okay, it is going to be a PEM file, small file. So key file is basically something like this. What do you say? Signature, right? It is just this signature. You should not edit this or do anything, right? So what you get is the private key, right? So this is the private key. The public key is stored on the AWS side, right? If you lose this key, you cannot recover this key. You have to be careful, okay? Because the only time you will be able to download your key is when you create the key. After that, you will not be able to download the key, okay? When you say create key pair, you give a name. When you say create, it will automatically download the file. Or when you create the instance at the last step, when you say create key, you can download the key. After that, you can't come here and download the key, because what is stored here is the public key, not the private key. Private key is given to you, right? Think of the private key like your password or something like that. Okay, so the private key you have to keep it safe, right? Just like you would any password. Okay, so AWS will not store your private key. You can download it only the time you create it. After that, you cannot download it. If you lose it, it is gone. Okay, so you can create a key pair over here in AWS, or you can import a key pair if you already have it, because you can these are all standard. It's not anything specific to AWS. Like I said, you can use gen to create a key pair, right? You can say generate a key pair, you will get a you will get the key. You can import it into, you can click import and you can choose the file, import it into AWS. Okay, so we have the key also, right? We have the keys which I have specified here, right? So and I said launch instance, right? The instance, if you go to the last step, right? What is it going to ask you? The key pair, right? Do you want to choose existing key pair, create new key pair, or proceed without key pair? If you say proceed without key pair, which means that you already know the password built into the image. If you already know the password which is there in the image, then you don't need to use key pair. Now in this case, we don't know what is the password. So in Windows, what happens is, right, the key is used to decrypt the password. Right, a key consists of the public key which AWS stores and the private key that we have. Okay, using this combination, you can connect to the instance. Right, for Windows, the key is used to obtain the password. Right, for the Linux, we use the key itself to log into the machines. Okay, so in Windows, you need the key to decrypt the password. right? If you already know the password, then you don't need the key. You can say proceed without key pair. Okay, so I said create new key pair. I specified the name and I click download. So here you get the warning, right? That says you will not be able to download this file again. So you download it here itself. If you don't click download key pair, you just give the name and you right, right. So you have to download the key here. After this step, you can't download. Okay, and you launch the instance. Okay, so we have launched the machine. So I have the IP address, I have the username, I have the key. So how do I log in? So first you need the password. So you can go to actions and say get Windows password. Choose the machine, go to actions and say get Windows password. So here it will ask you to, to provide the key. It will tell you what key you used and you have to provide the key. Right? So basically what it is doing, it is decrypting the password. The password is there. AWS, it does the process, right? Default password is created and it is encrypted. Right? To decrypt it, you need to provide the key. Right? You can choose file and you specify the key. Right? Or you can open the key and copy paste the contents. Both are same because the key is basically this signature. Don't change, don't edit anything here. Right? You choose file, specify the key, and you say decrypt password. Right here you see it is giving some error. Why it is giving the error? Because I used the wrong key. What was the key? Demo Mumbai 17 September. I used the one which we just created. So it was the wrong key. While launching this machine, I said use this key, Demo Mumbai 17 September. So let me choose the correct key. Okay. Now I'm saying decrypt password. Now you see it is given you the password. Let me just copy this. Keep it right. So you have the IP address or the DNS name, right? Right, you can use either the public IP or the public DNS, that is up to you, right? I will use the IP and then you open remote desktop and then use the username administrator and then this password. You can decrypt this any number of times. If you forget this password or you have not copied it, again you can go and say decrypt password and provide the key. It will give you the password again. Okay, so you give the username password and you log into the machine. This is how you log into a Windows server on RDP. Now you are inside the machine. So now you can go and if you want you can change the administrator password. Right? Ideally people will not use the default password that AWS provides. Your company will have its own default passwords and standards, right? So all that you can manage inside the OS or if you are using Active Directory through Active Directory, right? Right. So you can go here if you want to change the default administrator password, right? You can go to all this is inside the OS, right? You go to users, you change the password, right? Right. I'm giving some password, right? Now if I close this instance and I try to log in again, right? Username, everything is the same. But now if I use the password which I decrypted, right? If I copy this and use it again, right? It will not work because I have now changed the password inside the OS, right? So I have to use the new password, right? So the decrypting is for the first time to log in. Afterwards, you can change the password to whatever you want inside the OS. So then you have to use the new password going forward to log in. Okay. So after you log in, it is like any server, you can do whatever you want, right? It comes with a 30 GB storage by default. We will talk about storage also. Now let us say I want to configure this machine as per my requirement. I want to install some software, do some configuration, change the password, all that stuff, right? Let me call this software dump or whatever, right? So let me install some software and we'll try to create a image. Okay, let me copy some files. Say I'm going to install this software, right? So if you see this particular machine, right, it has only the basic OS and some default AWS tools pre-installed. It does not have any other softwares as such. It is the bare bones OS, right? And I'm installing some software, anything. This is just some small, the Notepad++ I'm installing. So you can do your configuration inside the machine, right? I copied some files over, right? I installed that software, right? Right? We have installed this software, so it will also be available, right? Okay. So now let us say I want a server with this configuration with Windows Server 2012 and the Notepad, right? So every server I cannot log in and keep installing, right? So I take one server, I install whatever I want, and then what I do is I say create image, all right? So you go over here to AWS, you choose the instance, and you go to actions and say image, and you say create image, right? So when you say create image, you can specify the image name. I will say Windows 2012 with Notepad++, something like this, right? Right, Windows 2012 with Notepad, right? Something version 1 or something. Some description I will give, and ideally don't enable this option called no reboot, because when you say create image, right, it will reboot your machine, because the OS has to be in a consistent state, the file system has to be in a consistent state. Because if you do it without rebooting, sometimes, right, the image may be corrupt or the file system integrity is not guaranteed. So it's always recommended to uncheck this so that your machine switches off. I mean, not switches off. It reboots and then it creates a image, right? Ideally recommended to leave it unchecked. If you don't uncheck this, also mostly it will work, but not recommended. If you enable this, the machine will not reboot. It will create an instance. Sorry, it will create an image without rebooting. Okay, and then it will ask you what are the volumes to use. So basically what is an image? It is taking a snapshot of the storage volumes. In our case we have only one volume, that is the 30 GB storage, right? We have only one disk, so think of one volume as one disk, not as one partition. This disk can have multiple partitions, right? So what is your image is basically it is something called a snapshot of the disks. So here if I have another disk, it will show you in the image that it will show you the second disk also. Do you want to include the second disk also, right? Or you can add a storage if you want to in the image, right? If you don't want, you don't have to add it. Okay, but by default you need the root volume, because the root volume is what has the OS. Without that there is no point of image, right? So when you're taking an image, if you have any additional drives, you can include that in the image, or you can add a drive from another machine or something like that, or a new volume, right? An image basically has a snapshot of the drives attached to it, and the root volume is compulsory because the root volume is what has the OS, right? So you cannot remove this, right? So it is basically taking a snapshot of this volume. That's what is happening in the image, and then you say create image. So when you do this, your machine will reboot, right? You see I have lost connectivity to the machine. It will reboot now and it will create the image. So the images you can see over here under images, right? It is saying pending, so it is creating a image of that machine. So what is this image? It is basically something called a snapshot. We'll come back to this, right? It is basically a snapshot of the root volume. So here you see a snapshot is being created when we created an image, right? So it is taking a snapshot of that OS volume, right? So this image is basically actually this snapshot. So how long it will take, it depends upon how big your the volume was, how much data is there in that. Usually it will take a couple of minutes for this normal 30-40 GB. If it was a very big volume with a lot of data, probably a few more minutes, right? So this has to complete. So the image which we create now is private. That is, you are the owner. Okay? Only you can use this image. Other people, they cannot use this image. That is other AWS accounts. Whereas the images you see here, anybody can use. Right? The quick start, the marketplace, the community, anybody can use. Your AMIs will be over here. My AMIs. You have not created any AMIs because our AMI is still being created. So it is private by default, but it has other options. Right? So like I said, a lot of people have multiple AWS accounts. Right? So here you see now the image is available. If it is available, it means that the snapshot has created complete. Right? So this image is now available. Your instance is going to be there as it is. It would have rebooted and come back up. You can log into the machine as usual. Right? Right? This is the original machine from which we took an image. Right? Right? Notepad software, everything is there. Right? The C drive with our folder, it is still there. This is the original machine. Now I finished creating an image. What I can do, I can terminate this machine if I want to. Right? So let us go to actions and quickly see a couple of these options high level. So let us say I'm going to say stop. So now I'm doing stop from the OS side. Sorry, not OS side, from the AWS side. Right? OS side means from here. Right? You go here and you say switch off. Right? I'm not doing it from the OS. Right? I'm doing from the AWS side. So it is still safe. It is not like from here, if you are saying stop, it's like forcefully switching off the machine. No. Actually, AWS recommends you do it from the AWS side. Right? It is like a safe, proper shutdown. Right? So ideally, AWS recommends you do this whether you're stopping the machine or rebooting the machine. Right? Do it from the AWS side. Right, either from the GUI or from the command line or something, but you can do it from the OS also, no problem. But it is safe. You should understand that it is a safe shutdown, not like a forced shutdown. It gracefully shuts down the OS. Okay, so it's no problem. So now I'm doing the switch off from the AWS side. So when I say stop, see the instance is going to go into the stopping state and it will be stopped. That is, you are switching off your machine. Okay, so have we spoken about the instance, the life cycle? Do you guys remember? I'll put it up again.
No.
Okay.
Sid, I have a question here. So, when you're creating an image, before we are creating an image, we are modifying the password, right? Administrative password.
Yeah.
After creating the image, will it use the same password or a different default password?
We'll see. I'll show you all. Right. So here is a diagram showing you the states in which the instance can ideally be in. Will usually be in. Right. It will not be in anything out of this. Right. So how did we create the machine? We choose the AMI. Right. First step, we choose the AMI, and then we did some configuration, and then we did launch. Then what happens? If you look at the instance state, means what you see here. Right. Now it is stopped. Right. But initially when we created the instance, right, for a few seconds it will be in the pending state. Right. And then what happens? It comes into the running state. Right. In green. Then what happens? when the machine is in the running state, what can you do? Any server or your laptop, when it is switched on, what can you do? What can you do? You can either reboot, or you can either stop, or you can hibernate it, or you can throw it out of the window. Same thing. These are the three options you have when the machine is in the running state, because you cannot start it again. It's already started. It's in the running state. So if you want to reboot, when you say reboot, it will go into the rebooting state and it will come back to the running state, right? So here, if you go, for example, right, if you go to actions, you can say start, stop, hibernate, reboot, or terminate. These are the 5 states in which, the 5 things that you can do. So currently the machine is stopped. So what can you do with the stopped machine? You can either start it again, or you can throw it out. That is, you can terminate. You can't reboot the stopped machine, right? You can only start it again or terminate. These are the only 2 options. So if the machine is already started, it's in the running state, you can either reboot, you can stop, or if hibernate is enabled, you can stop, hibernate it, right? So when you say stop or stop hibernate, it goes to the stopping state, and then the final state will be stop, which is what we did now. We said stop. So when I did stop, what happened? It said stopping, then it goes to the stop state. So when it is in the stop state, what can you do? You can either start it or you can terminate it. If I say start, it will go to the pending state again, right? If I say start, you'll see it will be in the pending state for a couple of seconds or minutes, depending on how long it takes. Then it comes to the running state, right? It goes to the pending state, then it comes back to the running state, right? And here, if you say terminate now that it is started and in the running state, what can you do? You can either stop, hibernate, because we didn't enable hibernation, that is grayed out, right? Or you can reboot, or you can terminate. If you say reboot, it will go to the rebooting state, come back to the running state, right? This is just the instance life cycle. What are the states in which it will be there, depending on what you do, right? After you stop the machine, what can you do? You can either start it or you can terminate it. If you say terminate, it will go to the terminated state. If it is terminated, you cannot recover it. It is gone, right? This is just the basic instance life cycle. Okay. Okay. So now we did a stop from the AWS side, right? So let me copy this IP address. Let us log into the machine again. So now we use the password which we gave. Right, it's still the same machine. All your configurations, settings, everything are there as it is. Okay. Okay, everything is there. Okay. Now I'm doing a stop from the OS side. Okay. Same thing. The state will go into the stop state. Now I'm saying stop, right? So it will go to the stop state. Okay. Right. Stopping, and eventually it will be stopped. Okay. So another thing you have to remember here, I told you, right, about the cost is, I'm not sure if I told you, but let me just repeat. So every time you press start, it is equal to 1 hour. Okay. What does this mean? Now I created this instance at say 8:45 a.m. Now what is the time? 9:08. So still total 1 hour is not over, but at 8:45 I said start. That is launch instance. So I have built for 1 hour. That is until I have already paid for until 9:45. But now in between I stopped the machine and I said start. I stopped it from AWS side and then start. Now again I stopped it from the OS side and again I'm going to say start. So now I pay for 1 hour, 1 hour. So I have already paid for 3 hours. You are charged for 3 hours. Even though still one complete hour is not over, right? Every time you do a stop and start, you are charged for 1 hour. You have to remember that. Even if within the hour, you might be charged for multiple hours if you stop and start your machine, the same machine. Or you launch a new machine, every time you press that start button, it is 1 hour. Right? Because practically in real time, you are not going to do it, but I'm saying while practicing, right, within the hour, you might be charged for multiple hours if you stop it. If you reboot, no problem. If you reboot 100 times within the hour, it is still considered as 1 hour. But a stop and start, right, is considered as one additional hour. Okay? The billing I told you, Windows instances are for the, they are, what do you say, rounded up to the nearest hour. For the Linux instances, it will be like 1 minute instead of hour. That is for the open source Linux machines. Anything else, RHEL, SUSE, they are all again like 1 hour. Right? So this behavior is you have to keep in mind. Every start is equal to 1 hour. Okay. So now we stopped the machine from inside the OS. What happened? It went into the stop state. Then what I can do? I can go and say start again. Now another hour. I'm built for another hour. Right. So now we saw this instance setting. We have this behavior. Right. So the default behavior is stop. Now if I change this to terminate, I'm changing the shutdown behavior to terminate. Right, because sometimes a scenario-based question on this will come in the exam. Right, now I change the behavior to terminate. So the machine is switched on, right? So I'm not, yeah, so let us, right, use its IP address. We log into the machine. Right, it's the same machine, right? We have all our stuff. Now if I do a stop from the AWS side, right, what will this instance state happen? It will go into stopping and it will be stopped. Let us just wait for this to go into the stop state. Okay, so now it is in the stop state. So what can I do? I can start it again. So I did this stop from the AWS side. So it stopped. Okay, so we'll wait for that machine to start up. We'll come back to this AMIs. So we have created this AMI, right? So using this AMI, you can create a new instance. Or what can you do if you want the same instance in a different location? So this image is there only in this region, in Mumbai. You want the same image in a different region. If you go to another region and check, you will not see the image. That is another thing. People will say, I'm not able to see the image. If you have created an image and it is not showing up properly or in the wrong region, that is, you created this image in Mumbai, so it will be in Mumbai only. In your account itself, you cannot see it in the North Virginia region. Right? Under the AMIs, you will not see your AMIs. That is owned by me over here. Right? So if you want the same image in a different region, you can go to actions and you can say copy image, copy AMI, and you can specify the destination region. Say you want it in the North Virginia region, you can copy it to that region. right? If you want, you can encrypt it and you can copy it, because this is not encrypted by default when we create it, right? The EBS volume was not encrypted. So if you want, you can encrypt it, right? And you can say copy AMI. So what this is doing, this is actually physically copying the image from this region to this region. So here in a few minutes, you should see that image over here, right? Status is pending because it is copying the actual snapshot. So it is transferring that data to this North Virginia region. So it is not like instantly it will be there. It will take some time depending upon the capacity, the size that is there. Okay. So you can copy your images to other regions so that you have that same, what do you say, you are able to recreate the same server in a different region if you want. Okay. So that is one of the basic operations. We'll see the other things, right? We'll come back, right? So now this machine is running again. So let us log into this. Okay, we are logged into the machine. Now I'm going to stop it from inside the OS. Now what will happen? We'll go to the, it's not stopping now, see. What is happening? We said shut down, but normally it should go to stopping and stop. But now what is happening? It is going down to the shutting down stage and it will be terminated because I changed the termination behavior to terminate. That is, if you do it from the OS, it will terminate the machine. If you do it from the AWS side, it will stop the machine. You have that behavior that you can control. For some people, they might want to do that. Suppose I'm taking class, right? After I show you, automatically I want to terminate the machine. It's a temporary machine. I can switch it off from the OS. It will terminate the machine automatically for me. But most of them, the default behavior is going to be stop, right? But you have to remember that if it is terminate, and it is applicable only when you stop it from the OS side, not from the AWS. Now this machine is terminated, means it is gone, right? So when you do a OS level stop with the termination behavior set to terminate, the machine is terminated. It will show you here in the console for some time. Don't worry, this machine has been terminated. You are not built for it anymore. But it will show you in the console for a couple of hours. Right now, if I go to actions and I say something, I can't do anything because the machine is gone. If you try to click on anything, right, it will say the machine is not there. You need to, so we have already terminated the machine. So it will still show up, but you can't do anything. Right? It will still show up, but you can't do anything. Okay? Because it is already terminated. So now if I say launch instance, again I can choose any AMIs that I want, or I can go to the AMI which I just created. So this AMI is private by default. I am the owner. Nobody else can use these things. Right? So I can choose this image and I can choose any instance type. It does not have to be the same type from which I created an image. Okay? I can create a smaller machine, bigger machine. So the AMI, it does not have any direct connection to the actual machine size as such. It is just the architecture. Like I said, some of them will be grayed out. Right? But you can choose any of the other things. It does not have to be the same thing as the one from which you created an image. Right? I created it using T3 small, I think. Right? So I can go T3 medium, T3 micro, whatever other sizes are compatible with that OS version and the architecture. Right? It doesn't have to be the same thing.
So that
Yeah.
so here the terminate, the word terminate means here completely wiping off, right?
Yes, completely wiping off. It's gone, throwing it out.
Okay. So if you stop it, if you change the behavior of terminate, like if you stop it at the OS level, it will terminate.
No. If you change the behavior, see the shutdown behavior has two settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shutdown behavior has two settings. The default is stop. So if it is stop, then from the OS level, if you say stop, then the machine will be stopped. Stop means we stop. You can start it again. If you do it from the AWS end, if you say stop, it will be stopped. This is what ideally we want. Whenever you switch off the machine, you want it to be stopped so that you can start it again. But if you change this
Okay.
behavior to terminate, so basically you can switch off your machine from two sides. One is from the OS or one is from AWS. So if you change it to terminate, and now from the OS if you say stop, it will not stop, it will terminate. That is, it is gone. Right? But if you do
Okay.
it from the AWS side, it will still stop. This behavior applies only when you stop it from the OS side, not from the AWS side.
Okay. Okay.
Right? So this behavior, stop or terminate, if you say stop from both sides, it will stop. If the behavior is terminate from the OS side, if you say stop, it will terminate. But from the AWS side, if you say stop, it will stop. You can start it again.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Okay. So we created the image. Now from that image, we are coming back and saying launching instance. Now maybe I'm launching T3 medium. Again, the same settings. I mean, you can launch it in a different VPC if you want to. So that image is specific to this region, Mumbai. So in Mumbai, you can launch your machine in any VPC. Suppose you want that same server in the dev VPC or the production VPC, you can do it, right? The image is the same, right? You want the same server in a dev environment, you put it in the dev VPC, right? You want it in the default VPC, put it in the default VPC, right? So remember, VPC in that is in that region. So the image is in the region. It is not in any VPC, right? Image is like your CD or whatever, right? You can use it to install OS anywhere. But if it is in a different region, you have to copy it over to that region. Hey guys, is my voice audible?
Yeah. Now it is fine.
Yeah,
Now it's audible.
I lost connectivity at the power again, so I'm connected on my data card. So yeah, if it disconnects, just hang in. Okay. So I hope the voice is clear. It's not breaking or any such thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you can copy the image over to the other region, and if you want, you can launch. But by default, the AMI is in the same region where you create the uh, image. Okay. So you can launch it in a different VPC if you want to, right? The same image, again, any subnet, all these things we saw, right? Some basic settings we saw, the shutdown. So some of these options you can change after launching the instance also, like the shutdown behavior, right? Termination protection. Termination protection I will enable over here this time. Okay, and we'll see what that is, right? So next, storage again, right? So it is showing 30 GB. Why is it showing 30 GB here? Is because the image which I took, it had a 30 GB storage volume. So if you try to decrease this, it will not work. It will give you a error. You can increase it, but you cannot decrease it, because when you took an image, a snapshot was taken, right? What is the snapshot? 9E2A, something like that, right? If you look at this image snapshot, right, probably it will have the same ID, right? 9E2A. So what is an image? Basically, it is something called a snapshot of that storage volume. We'll talk about snapshots also, right? So image is basically a snapshot of one or more volumes. So that volume was 30 GB. So the snapshot will also be like 30 GB. So you cannot decrease it below that. That is why default it is showing 30. If you want, you can increase it, right? Now I can create a server from that image with maybe 32 GB or 33 GB also. I can add another volume if I want to, but we'll come back to volumes, right? Next, again, the usual stuff. You can choose your security groups or whatever, right? And you can say launch. So now, because we have changed the password, don't use the key. Okay. Now you can say proceed without key pair, because now I know what is the password. We have changed the default password, right? So if you can try to provide a key and you tell me what error you get. Okay. And I will say launch instance, but make sure you know the password, right? Now if you say launch instance, another instance is being created. Right, it will be a little slow. I'm using it on my data card. So yeah. Okay. So another instance is being created, right? So I can use this IP address. So Windows machines take slightly longer to be created compared to the Linux machines, because Windows are usually bigger in size. Okay, so immediately don't try to connect and say we are not able to connect, right? So ideally you want the status check to come to 2 out of 2 passed. We'll talk about what is the status checks and all that stuff. So usually when you're creating a machine, right, it will take a couple of minutes for Windows to be up and ready. Okay, sorry, I was not able to connect for what? For what reason? Any idea? Right, I think the machine should be up, but I'm still not able to connect. Why? Okay, we'll just wait for the status checks to pass or something. Okay, I think by now I should have been able to connect. Yeah, but you see, still I'm not able to connect. Why? Anybody? It is not even asking me for the username password.
Is it the
Because these are common issues that you will face in the exam. You will not get, but practically, why are we not able to connect? So the first thing I told you need to check is the security group, because now what happened? I lost power. I connected on a different, what do you say, different network. So probably my IP has changed.
okay?
So people will say I'm able to connect from home, from office. I'm not able to connect from home, right? Because probably their IP is different at home, right? So here while opening the port, I said inbound open port for this IP, but now my IP is not this. My IP is something else now. right? Now my public IP is something else, 157.48, because I don't have a static IP at home. Right? If my Wi-Fi router reboots, or if I connect to a different network, my IP will change. Right? So some people will say, yesterday I was able to connect at home, I'm not able to connect today. Probably their IP has changed. Right? So we need to go edit this. Earlier you would have put my IP, but now it will not show my IP because it will change to custom, because this IP is no longer my IP. My IP is something new. So again I go and say my IP, it will update the new IP. So don't think that if you say my IP over here, it will automatically update with your current IP. No. At present, what is your IP? It will automatically put that. If it changes at your end. AWS end, it doesn't change. You have to change it. Okay.
So is it because like since you there's a fluctuation in network connection, you change the device, it got
Yes, because I don't have a static IP at home. Right. If I reboot my Wi-Fi router, also the IP will change because I don't get static IP. Office usually you will have static IP, the same IP. At home, ideally most people don't have static IPs. That IP keeps changing. So if you created a machine yesterday and you're able to connect to it, today you're creating the machine using the same security group, you're not able to connect. Probably your IP has changed. Okay. Especially when you're connecting from home. So security group you might create and keep. You will say open the port for my IP. But your IP will change from depending on, it might change every day, or if you lose power, reboot your router, or you connect to a different hotspot, right? Your IP will change unless you have paid for a static IP. Right? So you have to make sure you update the security group. So some people think if I say my IP over here, it will automatically update your IP every time. No, this is just at the particular moment it will put that IP and it will save it. So this rule will not update itself automatically if your IP changes. You have to only go and update it. Okay. So now if I say connect, I should be able to connect. Right? Why is it not connecting? Let me check one more thing. Where did I launch this instance? Which VPC? 9. Let me quickly go and check my VPC also. I hope Geo has not blocked the remote desktop ports. Because again, sometimes people will say, even after opening the port, they are not able to connect. Then it could be because of, like I said, mostly this happens in the office environments, right? People who try to practice AWS from office, they might not be able to connect to their machines, even if they open SSH and RDP, because at your office, the network level, they are blocking those ports outbound. Okay. Let me quickly check whether we have launched it in the correct VPC. So this is ideally the order in which you want to come, right? If some connectivity is not working, first thing is check the security group. So we know there is a mistake in the security group, right? So we corrected it. There might be mistake at other layers also. So don't jump across, what do you say, layers. Don't go check the VPC first, right? So it is always better to go from the bottom up, the most common stuff to the more advanced stuff while troubleshooting. I hope my IP is not changing randomly. This hotspot, you never know. But it's still the same. 1.186. Right, I think I put it in the (9E89). Yeah, it is in the correct VPC only. Right, the problem looks like, I think on Geo remote desktop they are blocking, I think. Anything else that you guys can think of that could cause this problem? Right. Let us see. Right. Anything else? Right. So we launched this machine in this VPC 9E89. What is 9E89? It is the default VPC. And default VPC has what? I told you it has all public subnets. Right. The default VPC has all subnets in the default. That is one subnet per availability zone, and all subnets are public subnets because they are associated to the route table, which has a route to the internet gateway. This we saw in the VPC. And because I have not made any changes to the default VPC, everything should still be a public subnet. So it doesn't matter which subnet I launch my machine. I've launched it in 1A, right? In this subnet, right? 552E8, right? Whereas 552E8, it is this subnet, and it has a route to the internet gateway, right? So it should accept connections from outside. For it to accept connections from outside, we made sure security group is configured correctly, right? And make sure the IP which you are adding is correct. Right?
We have to open the port for RDP, right?
Yeah, I opened it, right, in the security group. I hope in the correct, right? So here is our security group. What is the security group that we choose? I hope it is the correct security group, WinSG. So for this machine, WinSG, or you can click on this directly if you're confused, right? So for WinSG security group, inbound we need to open RDP, which is already open, right? The port again, sorry, the IP didn't change. So sometimes this also happens, guys. When you change the IP, you see it is still back at the old IP. It is not in the new IP, because this also I have seen happen sometimes. The GUI, right? If you have a slow internet connection or if it is in the cache, it will not save sometimes, because I have seen this happen 2-3 times at work, especially with my friend. He never switches off his laptop. He has hundreds of windows open, right? When he updates the security groups and he clicks save, here it will show like it has saved, but really it will not update, right? Which is what I also did, right? I have a slightly slow internet connection, right? Now I did save, right? Even earlier I did, but always make sure you refresh this page and also check, right? Previously also I did the same thing. I hit save 3-4 times, but you see still the IP was showing the old IP, right? Or probably we updated the wrong security group, one of those things, right? So sometimes that behavior is also there. Okay, now if I try to connect, it should ideally allow me to connect. Okay, so if you are not able to connect, mostly it's security problem, security group problem, or at your network side they are not allowing that port outside, or for some reason that security group didn't update itself, especially when you are doing from the GUI. Okay, so now we are logging into the machine. We created this machine from our AMI. Okay, so yeah, I think the power is back at my place. Again, my IP will change. Again, my IP will change. Just hang in. If you lose the connection, I will reconnect back to my broadband connection. Right, guys, is the audio clear?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes.
So now if I check again, my IP would have changed again, right? Come back to 49. But here if I see, I have lost connection right? So let me go and update my security group again, right? So now my IP has changed. So let me go edit again my IP and just try to refresh this page once or twice, especially if you have a lot of tabs open, right? Now it does. Now if I try again, I should be able to connect much faster. Right, so we have logged into the machine which we created from our AMI. Now it is a bigger machine, T3 medium. And also remember, right, your OS will not say what instance type it is or something like that. How do you know how much RAM and CPU you have? To check in my computer. Here in my computer, it will not show you like M3, M4 or T3 or whatever. It will just show you how much memory and what CPU it has. Right? The instance type, it will show you on the wallpaper. So this is the default wallpaper that they put. If you change the wallpaper, you will not see this also. Okay. So basically at the OS level, right, you will not see like T3 micro, but there is a way to get that information from inside the OS also. But ideally, when you go to my computer properties, don't expect to see T3 medium or the AWS instance. For this server, it will just show you how much memory, how much CPU it has. If you want to know what instance type it is, there is a different way to check. Always not this thing, because some people will connect to the command line or whatever. Then how will you know whether it is T3 medium or M4 large? By looking at the RAM, you can't say, because there are multiple instances with the same size of RAM, right? You might have M5 large and M4 large, both have 8 GB RAM. So how will you know whether it is M4 or M5? You can look at the AWS console and you can get that information, or within the OS also you can actually get that information. We'll talk about that later, okay? But within the OS means you don't look at the properties and expect to see it there. There's a different place where you need to see to get this information, not the wallpaper, because in the interview sometimes people will ask, right, how do you get that instances information from inside the OS? Right, from outside the OS we know, to open the console you go to the machine, you get its full details. That is what is its IP, right? What is the instance type? What is the instance ID? What is the AMI? What availability zone? All this information which you see here under the description is also available. Most of it is available from inside the OS also, because some people, they will never access the console. The developers or whatever, they might directly go into the machine and use the machine, right? But from inside the OS also you can get that information. Don't say from the wallpaper, right? So that is not the correct answer. There is a different way to get that information, right? We'll see that also, right? So we have launched this machine from our AMI. So it will have the same thing. What was there in our image, right? Prior to we created the C drive, we created a folder called software dumps. So everything will come as it is. Your installed software, your data, you have any spam, virus, everything will come, because it is just taking a snapshot of whatever is there. So you see in software dumps, we added a file, it is still there. Then we installed the notepad. So you see my history also is still there, right? So everything as it is will come, right? When you create a image, right? So now this is your image. So you can use this to launch an instance and it will have the same configuration, whatever your OS plus the software and whatever additional configurations you did. If I change the password, I'm using the same password. I could have created a new user, everything will come as it is, right? Whatever folder I copied, whatever data, everything is going to be as it is, right? So that is AMI, and we saw how to copy the AMI to a different region. So you see now this AMI is available in US East also. So now I can launch the same server with the same configuration in US East also. So they are both independent. Here AMI is there, here a copy of that AMI is there. If I remove it over here, right? So to remove an AMI, you do deregister. That is, you don't want this AMI anymore, right? You can say deregister. That image is gone, but the snapshot will still be there. So remember that AMI is just a snapshot. You actually pay for the snapshot. Okay, we will see what is a snapshot going forward. But remember, AMI is basically a snapshot. What you see here is just the link to that snapshot, like a bootable link or something like that. Think of it like that. So if you delete the AMI, right, actually the cost is for the snapshot, not for the AMI, right? So make sure you delete this snapshot also in US East where I copied. In the original region, it will still be there. It will not remove it over here, right? So once you copy, their copy is there, here copy is here. Okay. So here you have the image, which is technically this snapshot. So if you try to remove this snapshot, right, it will not allow you to remove because it is currently in use by that AMI. Because that AMI is still there, you cannot remove this snapshot. If you want to remove this snapshot, you have to first remove the AMI. And removing the AMI automatically does not remove the snapshot. Okay. Okay. So we have this AMI. So what else can we do? We copied the AMI to another region. We deregistered the AMI, right? Okay. So the next thing is the permissions that you need to know. So this image is available in your AWS account. That is your account number. This account, you can copy it to other regions. But if you want to share this AMI with somebody else, you can. So here, normally what you see by default is owned by me. So there will be other images also, public images. Please don't use these things, right? We don't know who provided them, what is there in that, because AWS, it does not check for virus or anything. So you can create your image and you can make it public also, right? Some will be provided by the marketplace, some might be provided by some AWS account, right? So ideally, don't choose public images and don't choose from here. Always better to say launch, sorry, exactly, don't do this, right? Don't do what I just did. Don't choose public images from here and do. You normally go launch instances. You pick up an instance from the quick start or from the marketplace or from your AMIs, because anybody can make an image public. Right now, I just created an image, right? By default, it is owned by me. So I can go to permissions and I can make it public. That is, anybody with an AWS account can use this. But AWS, it does not scan for any virus or anything. So if I put something in this and I call it a Windows server with SQL server, there is no way to verify it unless they launch it. Right? I could put something bad and make this image public and somebody will use it. Right? You can create some harm. So ideally, don't use public images from here. Some of them will be from the marketplace itself, right? But it is better to go via the marketplace or use your own images from a proper source, right? So by default, you will see owned by me, or if you say private images, you will see images which have been shared with you, which have been shared. So I see a lot of shares because I have used this in the past. You may not see anything because you probably have not used any other marketplace images. But you can share your image with other people. How do you do that? You go to modify image permissions. You keep it private, but you share it with specific account numbers. Right? Like this, you enter the 12-digit account number and you say add permission and you say save. So once you do this, the other person, the account to which you have shared, he can go and click on private images and he will be able to see it. Right? He means, like I said, companies have multiple AWS accounts. So they can create an image in one account, give permission to another account to use that image. Right? Instead of recreating the images multiple times. Either it is across the regions or same region, different AWS account. Right? So if you share this image, right, you go to modify image permissions, you give the account number and say save. The other account will see this image in the Mumbai region, not in any other region. Again, another thing, people will say I'm not able to see the image. So make sure they are in the same region in which you shared the image. If they want, again, they can copy the image to another region in their account. Okay. So these are some of the things that you can do with an AMI. Okay, so you cannot edit this AMI as it is, right? You cannot log into the AMI and edit. Now, if you don't want this software, right? You don't want this Notepad++, or you want to upgrade it. You launch an instance, you make the changes, then again you say create image. You call this image as the version 2 or something, right? You make some changes, then again you say, you go to your instance and you say create image. Right now you can say Windows 2012, right, with Notepad version 2, right? So maybe you upgraded the software or whatever. Then again you say create image. Again another image will be created. This existing image will not be overwritten. This image will be there as it is, Windows 2012 Notepad. Then you will get another image called Windows 2012 Notepad version 2, right? So the image basically contains whatever is there at that moment when you say create instance. Sorry, create image. Okay, so this is the process is the same whether it is Linux or Windows, right? You bring the machine's state to whatever you want, your configuration, your usernames, password, software, and then you say create image as the final step. Okay. Right. So the next thing is we need to talk about something called the status checks. So whenever you create an instance that is a virtual machine, right, there are two checks that AWS automatically performs, right, which is what you see in this column called the status checks. It says 2 out of 2 checks passed. What are the two checks? One is called a system status check and one is called a instance status check. These are two checks that AWS what you say, it performs on your instances. It is not a one-time check. It continuously performs these checks every few minutes, right? As long as your machine is in the running state, right, it keeps performing these checks, right? So what are these checks? What is a system status check? What is the instance status check? So the system status check, it checks the AWS systems which are required for this instance, right? So what is your instance? It's basically a virtual machine, right? You have the hardware, right, and you have the virtualization layer. Then you have your EC2 instance. So for this EC2 instance to be available, your hardware, your virtualization layer, and its backend, right, like the power, networking, all this should be working fine. If they fail, then your instance will be unreachable, right? On your laptop, if you have a VM, right, on your laptop you have a VM. If your laptop is having some problem, let us say the RAM went bad, then what happens? Automatically your VM also will be down because it is using the hardware from here, right? Same thing in EC2, right? Your laptop means you can fix. On AWS, you don't have access to the backend. You can only connect to your machine and use it at the OS level. The backend infrastructure, you don't have any control over it. If the virtualization layer is having some problem, some network connectivity problem at AWS, or this hardware itself is having some problems, so it will impact all the machines on this hardware. Not only you, other customers might also be sitting on this hardware. So the system status check and the instance status check, they check certain things. So the system status check, it basically checks the infrastructure on which this instance depends on, right? So it checks the whether your instance is going to be accessible, right? Right? And what it basically checks is the backend AWS systems which are required for that machine to be working, right? Like power, they have specified, right? Power, networking, software related stuff, right? All those things, right? If there is a problem with that, you will see system status check has failed. I may not be able to simulate this, right? Because it has to fail at AWS side. Then what is instance status check? Instance status check is another check which performs what do you say? It checks if your instance is accepting the network traffic. That is, if the network configuration is correctly configured. Right? What do you mean by that? Because some people might have multiple interfaces. Right? We'll come back to that. Multiple interfaces. Or say, for example, now I go into this machine. Right? right? Say I'm going here and I'm doing something and I'm disabling this adapter. Then what will happen? If I disable this network adapter, what will happen? Any idea?
We cannot connect internet inside this.
Yeah, we'll do it and see. Okay, so that is one answer. Okay, so what are the status check? The system status check, it checks the backend infrastructure on which your instance depends, and the instance status check, it checks the network configuration to see whether your machine is accepting traffic, whether it is in a state where it can accept traffic. So if you see these checks fail, then you have to take some action, because sometimes these checks might fail without you doing anything. The machine is working fine, and you see that the checks are failed and people are saying they are not able to connect to the machine, or something which you have hosted on the machine is not you are not able to connect to it. Say you installed some Apache or you hosted some application, it is down because the instance is down. Why the instance is down? It has been working so far, and then you see that it will say either 2 out of 2 passed, or 0 out of 2 passed, or 1 out of 2 passed. You need to check which status check failed, right? So usually when the system status check fails, what do they say? They ask you to replace your instance. Replace means what? What they ideally recommend is you to stop and start your machine. Okay, to stop and start your machine, because we know what happens when you stop and start. It goes on a different hardware, so there is a possibility that it will recover by doing a stop and start. It will stop and start in the same availability zone. If it was some problem with the underlying infrastructure, which is mostly the case, mostly it will be some problem with the hardware or the software, the virtualization layer on that hardware. Mostly, worst case, it might be an availability zone problem, but mostly it will be something related to the underlying hardware or the power or something like that. So what you can do is you can stop your machine and start it again. You can't stop it from the OS, obviously, because you will not be able to log into the machine. So you can do it from here. You can go to actions, instance state, stop. If you are not able to stop also, right, sometimes when you say stop, it will be stuck in the stopping state or it will not stop. Then you can contact AWS support. If you don't have a support plan, you have to wait for a few minutes. Then you will see a box here that says contact support. Even if you don't have support plan, after a few minutes, right, you will see a link over here to contact support, or you can wait for a few minutes. They might fix the problem in the backend and it might be up again, right? You can wait for a few minutes, or you can stop your machine and start it again. If you are not able to stop it, or if you are not able to start it again, you can contact AWS support. They will do it from the backend, right? That is for the system status check. If you see the instance status check failed, mostly it is because of some network configuration problem at your end. If you see both of them fail, you see both status check and instance status check fail, mostly it could be some problem at AWS end, because usually when the system status check fails, most of the time the instance status check also will automatically fail. Most of the time. I cannot say all the time. Most of the time when the system status check fails, the instance status check also fails. If you see only the instance status check fail, probably some mistake you made in your machine, some network related configuration or something is wrong, right? That is, your instance is not in a state where it can accept traffic. It's not the security group. Security group, you can close all ports, still the status checks will pass, right? It is in a inconsistent network state, some firewalls or related something, or especially people who are using multiple interfaces, right? They can mess up the configuration and your machine will be unreachable. So let me try to show you that. So like I said, if I disable this network adapter, what will happen? I have disabled it. Now what happened? I have lost connectivity. I have lost connectivity to the instance. Why? Because I disabled the network connection. Right? It will not connect. No. Now if I again go to remote desktop, the machine is on, but the network adapter I disabled. Right? So what happens? Now the machine is not going to accept traffic. When the security group port is open, it does not, its network adapter is disabled. So now if you see, the instance status check will fail. It again, don't expect it to happen immediately, because these checks happen every few minutes. So in a couple of minutes you will see that at least the instance status check will fail. Right? So now how can I recover? If it was your virtual machine in your office or your laptop, you can connect a monitor and you can go back and enable it. The machine is still running. Right? So any idea how can I recover this?
You can start and stop.
Okay. If I start and stop, what will happen? In Windows, the network adapter is not going to be enabled automatically. Will it be enabled? Now, for example, on your laptop, you go over here and you go to the network adapter, you disable this and you reboot your machine, what happens? Still it will be in the disabled state, right?
Yes.
Mostly, unless you have some script which is going to start up the interfaces, usually it will be in the disabled state. So you can try to stop it and start it and see what happens. We'll assume even after stopping and starting, still I am not able to connect. So still it is saying 2 out of 2 passed, but like I said, it is not going to be immediate. It will take a few minutes for it to show up as failed. So we'll just wait for it to show up as failed. But meanwhile, if you want, you can stop and start, you can reboot, you can do those things also. Okay? But you have to do it from the AWS side, obviously, because you are not able to connect to the machine. You can still go here and say stop, reboot, right? As far as possible, try to stop and start it, because most of the time the reboots cannot help you. There is a status check. You can try, there's no harm, but mostly it will be stop and start which will help you, or if it does not help you, then you have to check something else. Mostly for status check. Instant status check fail means AWS may not be able to help you. Right? You need to reboot your machine or make modifications to the operating system so that it accepts traffic. Right? You have to troubleshoot them.
Yeah. Do you have any option to instead of doing RDP, do you have an option to log into the machine?
No, the
Like,
network adapter itself is disabled. How will we connect? Because remember, the traffic is going through the network adapter, right? It is not going, how it is reaching the machine through the network, whether you are doing RDP or SSH or browsing the internet, the traffic is going through that adapter. That is why in VPC I told you, the IP address security group is everything for the network adapter. It is not for your machine, right? The network adapter is the gateway to your machine. Whether traffic is coming in or going out, it is through that elastic network adapter, right? So whether your security group and all these things are sitting on the adapter. So you can have multiple adapters, right? So people can come into your machine or traffic is going out through the interface. Now the interface itself is down. I disabled it. So you cannot, even if you open all the ports, you cannot connect to the machine. So now you see it says instance status check fail, right? The instance is not reachable. So now we know what is the problem. So what can we do? If you can try stop rebooting, I'm not going to do that because I know it will not come back up, right? So what I can do now? Yes. So remember, instance is only CPU memory. What is your EC2 instance? It has some CPU, some memory, and some network performance. Some network performance. So storage, you are coming from ABS. You can add as much as you want, 30 GB or 32. So if you see for this machine while creating, I think I put 33 GB. You will see that after we log in. So the security groups are all outside. Then you have the interface, elastic network interface. So in VPC flow logs, I told you, right? You're capturing traffic for what? For the interface, not actually for the instance. Right? So the interface is attached to this instance. So the IP which we have is for this interface. The security group is for this interface. The interface is attached to this machine. Right? It is an additional thing. So if you go to interfaces, right? The network interfaces, you have this interface. It is attached to this machine. And this interface is down. You cannot go to actions and say enable, right? So what you can do is you can create another network interface. and attach it to that machine. Right? Now I have this interface, the default interface, which has this security group and the IP. Right? The machine's IP is actually this interface's IP. Like I said, on your laptop, if you have two interfaces and you connect your machine to both the networks, right? You connect both the LAN and the Wi-Fi, your machine will have two IPs, right? Because each is a different interface. One is a Wi-Fi interface, one is the LAN interface. Each has its own IP when connected. Because this is not connected, it is saying unplug. If I plug in my same router to this on the same LAN, I will get two IPs for my machine. That is one IP per interface. And the Windows firewall and all those are protecting what? Your interface. Not your machine as such, it is that interface. For that particular interface, you can specify which is your home network, right? The Wi-Fi thing you can choose and all that stuff, right? So all these networking stuff and all those things, what are they protecting? It is actually that interface. That is the traffic coming through that interface. This interface is just attached to your machine, right? Same concept here. We have one interface which is attached to this machine, which has this IP and all this stuff, and it has this security group, Windows security group, right? Which is allowing the ports, but it is down. So from this side, you cannot enable it. So what I will do is I will create another interface, right? I will call this say backup, right? And make sure it is in the same subnet as your instance. Otherwise, you will not be able to attach it, right? My instance is in this VPC, this subnet. Make sure it is the correct subnet ID, not just the availability zone, because you might have multiple subnets in the same availability zone. Here you see we have two subnets in 1A, but my machine is in this subnet 552E8, right? And then you can auto assign the private IP. That is, it will pick up an IP from this subnet range, and then you need to specify a security group. I'm going to attach the Windows security group to this interface. So think of this like you're buying a network interface card from the shop, a NIC card. So now we have created another interface in the same availability zone with the same security group. Obviously, the IP will be different, but in the same range of your subnet. Now, this interface is not attached to anything. We just created it. Now, I can attach this interface to my machine, to my instance, right? This instance is still on and running, but we are not able to connect. So I say attach. Now it is attached to this instance. Now my Windows machine has two interfaces. We know one of the interfaces is down. Now we have another path to enter the machine. Right now if I go to my instances, you will see that it will have two IPs, two private IPs, and still only one public IP, because this public IP was assigned when I launched the machine. This IP is mapped to the first interface, that is 211 IP. This is the second one. So now we need to give a new IP. If I try this old IP, we'll see whether it's working. Right? It will not work because this IP is mapped to the first interface. Right? If you go to the network interfaces, the IP is mapped to what? This public IP is mapped to the first interface. That is the primary IP. Right? Now we are trying to connect through this because the first interface has been disabled. So what I can do, I can assign a elastic IP to my machine because I am coming from outside. If you were inside the VPC, you could have straight away RTP'd using this private IP. It would have worked. Because I am coming from outside, I need a public IP. So I will allocate a new public IP and I will attach this to my interface. I will say associate, and now I will say associated to this particular interface. Right? What was that interface? Let me double check. Let me make sure it is a correct interface. Choose this instance. You can go and check its interface. ETH1 is the second one, 6582. So I am attaching it to 658. Right? Automatically the private IP it will pick up, right? And I am associating it. Right? So let me do this one. Now I can take this elastic IP. Now it has two public IPs, two private IPs. So I can go in with the new IP. Sorry. Right now you see it is letting me connect. Same machine. You see, this adapter is disabled. Now I have connected to this machine through this adapter. So now what I can do, I know what is the problem. You see the instance status check will still. Right, now we know what is the problem. Right, now this check has passed because we attached the second interface. Now it is able to accept traffic. Now if you want to go back to using the initial interface, because all your servers, what do you say, all your connectivity is via that, you fix the problem by enabling this adapter again. And you can remove this additional one which you used if you don't want. Right, you can go back to the network interfaces, right, and you can choose that interface, that backup interface, and you can detach it. Right, you can do force detach if you want to, but I mean, because we don't have anything, right, I'm going to do force, or else sometimes you might have to switch off the machine. Now you see this interface is detached, so I will lose this connection because I went to the 65 connection through that interface. So now I need to go back through the original interface. So if you don't want this network adapter, you can remove it, the backup one. And also make sure any elastic IPs you have, you release the IPs. Just hit refresh and then go and release that. Otherwise unnecessary cost. Now how can I connect to the machine again? I use its original IP. Right, we have this. Right, same machine, we have removed the backup adapter which we put for troubleshooting and logging into the machine. Right, so in some places you will see people having instances with multiple interfaces, not only to troubleshoot these kind of things, especially when people are using some network related what do you say, appliances or images like a firewall, right, those type of things need multiple interfaces. Right, those type of things need multiple interfaces. Right, another reason why people use multiple interfaces is to allow certain traffic through a certain interface and certain traffic through another interface. Now say you have a EC2 instance, right, say on which you have hosted some application, right, some Tomcat or whatever which is running on port 80, and you want everybody to access the application. So what you do, you will open the security group port, you will open port 80 inbound from anywhere, right, so that everybody can access your website, right, so that everybody can access the website. Okay, but you will not open RDP or SSH, right, it is not required. So you can open, you can say SSH I will allow only from my office IP. So here you have the interface. So remember, your security group port, your IP, all that is for the interface. The interface is what is attached to this machine, right? So what you can do is you can have another interface, and what you can do is for the first interface you can only allow the 80 traffic from anywhere. So if anybody is opening your application, their traffic comes like this through this interface. If these people they try to find the IP of your public IP for that interface, they can ping the website and find the IP address. And if they try to open port 22 or something, it will not work. If they try to connect via SSH or any other port other than 80, it will not accept traffic because you are saying accept traffic only port 80. But you have some people in your office, right, your team members or whatever, who need to SSH into the machine to do some work. So for them, you can attach another interface with a different IP. Here the IP say 1.1.1. Here another interface will obviously have another IP. Here you can have another security group and open SSH port to your office IP. So people who want to SSH will use a different IP and your services are exposed on a different IP. These people, they may not know this IP. If they try to find, they will probably be able to find this IP. Okay, so we call this the management network or a multi-homed instance. right? So certain type of traffic you're allowing through one interface, certain type of traffic through another interface. This also some people do, right? You can expose different services over different IPs, different the network interfaces. Because remember, the instance is performance, right? The instance itself is CPU, RAM, and the network performance. So each, right, there will be some throughput, right? We saw when you go to the instance types, you will see two columns. One is the network bandwidth or the network throughput, and the other is the EBS bandwidth or the EBS throughput, right? So sometimes having multiple interfaces, you can get better throughput for different what do you say, services, like something like this, right? Or you are keeping it more secure. Instead of opening SSH on the same interface, you are adding a different interface for it. Okay, for troubleshooting purposes, for these type of things, are especially if you are using some networking appliances, you might need to have multiple interfaces, or you are using SSL certificates. But nowadays, it is possible to do it using a single interface. But for older Windows machines, right, like Windows 2012 and all that stuff, right, if you are using a SSL certificate, you needed a public IP or something, multiple interfaces, right? Uh, yeah. So for those things you can use. So interfaces are free. There is no cost for the interfaces as such, right? The interfaces, security groups, all those are free, right? If you have more public IPs, you pay for it. So I told you, your instance is allowed one public IP per instance. If it has two, then you pay for the extra one, right? So remember that with respect to the elastic IP. So one public IP per machine is free. More than that, you pay for that small fee. And if your machine is not in the running state, you pay for the elastic IP. Right? This we discussed in the VPC. Right? So that is about the status check. You can just click on this, right? Or you can just click on this, learn more. What is status check? Whatever I explained is basically going to be there, right? So this also comes in the exam often, right? The status check is failed. So system status check, mostly I will not be able to simulate it because it has to fail at the AWS side. So when that happens, ideally don't reboot, but stop and start your machine, right? It will migrate to a new hardware. If it was the hardware problem, it would have been fixed, or you contact AWS support, right? So other technical stuff, they will not respond because you don't have support plan. If you have a support plan, fine, you can create a case immediately. But otherwise, if you are on the basic support plan, you have to wait for a few minutes until here a box pops up saying contact support. If the system status check fails, instance status check fails, you will not be able to contact support because 99% it is some problem at your end, right? Okay. So let me know if you have any questions, or I will go to. Okay. So the next, so now whatever we saw applies to the Linux machines also. But how you attach the interface or how you make it come up might be different in the OS. Right here in Windows, you double click it, it is enabled. In Linux, you have to do uh, something like if up ATH0 or some command you have to run. But the process is the same, right? How you attach the interface, how you attach the IP, and how you connect to it is the same whether it is Linux also. Okay. So after you create the instance, you can remove the image. Because some people think if you remove the image, the instance also will go. No, image is image, instance is instance. So using this image, I created an instance. I can deregister this image if I want to. That is, from now onwards, I will not be able to use this image anymore. I can deregister the image and delete the snapshot. By mistake, you deregistered the image. You want it again, you can choose the snapshot and you can say create image again. Right? We'll come back to that. We'll come back to what is snapshots. Right? I'm deleting this also. I don't want it. But your instance will still be there. Okay? Once you have used the image and created the machine, machine is different, image is different. Both are independent of each other. Right? In your image, your instance description, it will show you the image ID. But it is not compulsory that this image ID should exist. Now, if I click on this, right, it will just show you this but if you search for this AMI, it will not be there because I removed it. Right? So don't think that just because it shows the AMI ID here, this AMI will be there. It may not be there. Right? Because either that image has been removed or replaced. Because here also, if you go and say launch instance, right, every image will have a unique image ID. Every image will have a unique image ID. This same image in a different region will have a different ID. Right? The same image in a different region will have a different ID. This is important whenever you are doing programmatically creating machines, right? Both are Amazon Linux 2, both are ditto same image, but their image ID will be different. Right? Here you see 7C, 780. Here you will see a different thing. So different regions, same AMI. Same AMI means technically it is the same, but it is in a different region, so it will have a different image ID. Okay, so some people while creating programmatic, they will copy this image ID and they will put it. If they would have copied it from some other region, that same image when you copy to a different region, it will have its own ID. So no two images will have the same ID. So you have to be careful with them. Okay, so this image ID may not be there because tomorrow if AWS updates this image, it might still be the same Amazon Linux image, but with some new patches or something, this ID will change. Okay, this ID will change. Whatever instance you have created will still be there. It will still reference the old AMI. But if you go search for that AMI, it will not be there. If it is not there, probably AWS has updated or you have removed it if it is your image. Okay, but here it will always show you. As long as this machine is available, it will say it was created from this image. This image may or may not be there. Right? So every image has a unique ID. So if I take an image of this machine again, it will have a new AMI ID. Okay? If it is in a different region, different ID. Okay. So now we'll talk about something called placement groups. Right? So after you choose the instance type, you go to instance details. Right? Here you have something called placement group. So what is this placement group? By default, it is not enabled. So you can say add this instance to placement group, add to existing placement group, or create new placement group. Right? And you have some strategy, cluster, spread, and partition. What is this? Okay. So what is this placement groups? Right? What is this placement groups? Okay. So it is like a logical group. Right? It is like a logical group where you can place your machines. Logical placement, what do you say, of your instances. Right? To optimize for certain things. To optimize for certain criteria. What are the criteria? We'll see. So ideally, what happens? So by default, what happens? I told you, you have hardware, right? A lot of hardware in that availability zone when you are launching your machine. You have the virtualization layer, whatever, right? And when you say by default, when you don't use any placement group, you are launching a machine, it can go on this hardware. The second machine can go here, third machine can come here, fourth machine can come here, the fifth machine can go here. So AWS, it randomly places your, random means they have some algorithm or whatever, but you don't have much control. You say launch instance, whichever hardware is free, that AWS will choose and place the machines. Right? That is the default. You are not using any placement groups. right? This is without placement groups, right? So with placement groups, what happens is now they have some three strategies or three types of placement groups, right? The first one is called cluster, right? Cluster placement group. So what is this cluster placement group is? Your instances are placed close together in an availability zone. They are placed close together in an availability zone. So what does this provide is low latency, right? It provides low latency. So what is an availability zone? Say 1A is the availability zone. So 1A can have one building, two buildings, we don't know. Your VPC is the logical, what do you say, the LAN, the network. It spans across the availability zone. It might have two buildings also. So when you're launching two machines, one machine might be on a server which is in one building. The second machine may be on a server which is in a different building also. Or in the same building, it might be on different floors. Right? So where are all these servers located? In a rack. Right? You probably might have seen a server rack. Right? You will have a lot of servers. Like this, AWS has multiple racks, right, across buildings or across floors in the same building. A lot of servers, that is your hardware, right? So your virtual machine, one machine might be here, one machine might be here. These racks may be in the same floor, different building, in the same availability zone. So what happens, the farther apart they are, the higher the latency will be. Latency means in milliseconds, right? Throughput latency might be slightly higher if they are on different racks or they are on different, in the different buildings or different floors, right? But everything is in 1A, right? So when you choose cluster, what AWS will do is it will try to place these instances as close to each other as possible, maybe on the same hardwares or hardware in the same rack, or maybe within the same floor as much as possible. That is, they are giving you some control over how to place or where to place the machines. So for people who want low latency inter-instance communication, like it is recommended for people who are using high performance computing, HPC applications. In the exam, if you see some question like this, right? HPC applications, what type of placement group to use, right? Or you want low latency, right? What type of placement group to use? You use the cluster placement. So the machines which you launch, AWS will place it close to each other in that availability zone. Everything else is the same VPC, same IPs, all that same, but physically they are placed close to each other so that they get better low latency network performance. That is cluster placement. Okay. The next one is called partition placement. So the first criteria is it provides better, low latency and is suitable for high performance computing where you need inter-node communication, right, with low latency. Next is partition placement. Next is partition placement. So all these placement groups are free. There is no additional cost for it, right? It is on a best effort basis. There is no guarantee that it will happen. Sometimes you will get an error. Okay. So what is the partition placement group? How does it place the machines? Right. So the partition placement group, it spreads your machines. It spreads the instances across partitions. What is a partition? Right. So each partition, right, is like a different rack. Call this rack 1, call this rack 2. What is a rack? Server rack, right? The physical rack, right? So what happens? Each partition has its own rack. Each partition has its own rack. So when you launch, like groups of machines you're launching, right? So what happens? These machines and these machines, they don't share the same hardware, right? So it is like one rack per partition, right? So that maybe you get some level of availability, better availability. Because if you choose the default, then if you're launching, like I said, the 4 machines, they can be on any hardware. All your 4 machines could also fall on the same hardware. Then if this hardware fails, all your 4 machines are down, right? But if you use a partition placement group, right, you can spread your machines in groups, right? You can spread your machines in groups so that each partition is sitting on a different rack, not just hardware, different rack itself, right? So if this rack itself has a problem also, still maybe these two machines, the internode communication will be faster, right? These two machines, their communication will be faster, but also some amount of availability zone, right? So this partition placement group is used for what do you say? Again, for distributed workloads like Hadoop and those kind of things, right? Where you spread your instances across logical partitions, and remember, each partition is like a rack, one rack per partition, right? This is a logical partition. The backend, they try to place your instances based on this strategy, right? The last one is spread. I'll open the documentation and show you that you have a clearer diagram, right? The last one is spread placement group. So what is spread is, right, here each instance is placed on a different rack. That is one instance per rack, right? So say you're launching 3 instances. By default, what happens? They can go anywhere. Wherever there is free space, they will go and sit. So if this hardware has a problem, both these machines will be down. But when you use the spread, when you say use the spread placement group, what it will try to do is, each machine, it will try to put it on a different rack, right? So when do people use spread? They use it when they have fewer instances, but they want some better availability. They have fewer instances, but they want better availability, right? When you want to keep your instances separate from each other, that is, you don't want them sharing the same hardware, right? So for that, you also have something called the dedicated instances. So that is different. Don't get confused with that. Here is how you want AWS to place your machines. So when you choose spread, what happens is, each instance goes on a different rack, something like this, rack 1, rack 2. So if this rack 2 has a problem, only one instance will be down. It will not impact the other machine. So spread placement group, it can be across availability zones also. And you can spread a maximum of 7 instances. You can spread if you have 100 machines, you cannot say 100, because AWS will not give you hardware like that, right? If everybody will put spread, right? So that is not possible. The maximum is you can spread 7 instances. That is one instance per rack that AWS will place at the background. For you, it is the same VPC, same stuff. But at the background, they are placed like this. This is called spread placement group. All these are the logical groups. There is no cost for this. If there is space available, they will do it. Otherwise, you will get an error. They will say insufficient capacity. So which is what we will just open the documentation and we will see this, right? EC2. So in exam, you will get these type of questions, right? Like they're using high performance computing with low latency. They require which type of placement group, or how do you place your instances, right? Or you don't want to share underlying hardware, right? For distributed workloads, then what type of placement group you use? Partition placement group, right? You have critical instances which need to be kept separate from each other, right? What type of placement group, right? Those type of things. I think this should be the document. Okay, so these are the 3, right? Cluster, partition, and spread, right? max instances close together in an availability zone, right? For workloads to achieve high latency performance for tightly coupled node-to-node communication that is typical of HPC applications, right? It is not that you can't use it for other things, but this is what they recommend for what to use, right? You use placement groups to influence the placement of the group of instances, right? Suppose you have some four application servers, right? They need to talk to each other, or they need to be kept apart, right? So you can group them or place them based on certain strategies. That is what placement group is letting you. Same thing, partition. Partition spreads your instances across logical partitions, right, which don't share the underlying hardware. That is what I said, like rack or different server, they are going to place it, right? And spread is strictly places your groups across underlying distinct hardware. That is, each instance is on different hardware, so that even if one hardware fails, only one instance is going to fail. That is some improvement in availability, right? There is no cost for using placement groups, right? If you go to the cluster, first one, it is going to look something like this, right? So if all machines are placed close to each other, they might be on the same hardware also, right? They are in the same region, same availability zone, so they get higher throughput and what do you say, bandwidth, right? Low latency. This is what a cluster placement group, what is it recommended for applications that benefit from low latency, high throughput, or both. So earlier they had only one type of placement group, it was cluster. Around 2-3 years back, they had only cluster placement group, then they have launched these other things, right? Okay. So here is where, troubleshooting little you should know, just the basic things, right? Because when you try to launch your instance, right, if you want to use any of these placement groups, ideally try to do it at the same time. Because after you create a placement group and then you try to launch an instance, you might get capacity error. That I cannot show you, but it can happen, right? So suppose we go to placement groups and we try to create a placement group, okay? So let us go and try to do that, okay? So let us say launch instance. I'm just going to choose some machine, right? And let us say, for example, I will say I don't have any existing placement group. I will just say, let us call this cluster, for example, right? Why is this grayed out for this type, right? I don't think it is available now. It's not available now. Huh. Okay. I don't have any existing placement groups. Let us call this partition placement group. Okay. Let us create it of type partition. How many partitions you want, right? Right. We'll just keep this auto distribution. So let us quickly create. So I'm creating one instance, right? Review and launch. Don't worry about login and all this. I'm just trying to show you if we are going to get an error or no. Right? Everything else, your IP, VPC, all those will remain same. Right? So now let me say launch another machine. Right? So we'll go to our placement group. We already have our placement group. It shows that. Let us see the it didn't fail. Because sometimes while doing that, it will say insufficient capacity. Okay? If it says that, what to do? Right? If it says insufficient capacity, then what you do? That is what you should remember. Right? So usually they recommend when you are using cluster placement groups to launch the machines in a single request, because after you launch again you try to go and launch, you might get an error. These are just the recommendations. Try to use the same instance type. If you try to use a different instance type, again it might not be able to add it in the same placement group. It will ask you to try again after some time, right? So when you don't follow these things, there is a higher chance of you getting insufficient capacity error, right? So if you get an insufficient capacity error, what is recommended is, they say stop all your machines and start them again. If you get a capacity error while launching in a placement group that already has running instances, stop and start all the instances and try again, because this sometimes comes in the exam. You're trying to launch in the cluster placement group, you're getting insufficient capacity error. What do? You stop and start all the instances in that placement. That is, these two instances also, stop everything, again start, right? Because in the background, what happens, whenever you stop and start, they migrate to new hardware. So they will probably migrate to a hardware which has more space or something like that in the background, right? Same thing for the partition placement. What is a partition placement group? It helps to reduce the likelihood of correlated hardware failures. That is, each partition is like different hardware. So you can group your machines into logical partitions, each on its own hardware. That is, no two partitions share the same rack. That is, they are on different racks. Partition 1 is on one rack, partition 2 is on another rack. So you isolate the impact of hardware failures within your application. So where is partition placement group used? Like I said, if you see distributed workloads, those kind of things. It is not for improving, it is for low latency, not for that type of thing, right? Okay. So for these type of large distributed replicated workloads like Hadoop, right, Cassandra, those type of things, right? So it tries to distribute the instances across the partitions that you specify, right? Or you can specify which partition to launch it, right? Usually the similar stuff you want to keep it on a partition or something like that, right? So they can be in multiple availability zones, whereas cluster is in the same availability zone, right? Your cluster is grouped close together in the same availability zone, whereas partition placement groups can be in multiple availability zones but in the same region, right? And how many partitions you can have? 7 partitions per availability zone, right? And you can have any number of instances in each partition. Again, if you get a capacity error, then you have to wait, right? If you start or launch an instance in a partition placement group and there is insufficient unique hardware to fulfill the request will fail. These are not, what do you say, guaranteed. That you should remember, right? So you have to try again after some time. Okay, for the cluster, it is recommended to stop and start everything, or while creating itself, make sure you launch all the required machines in one shot, right? Then what is spread placement group? It is also a placement strategy where your instances are placed on different racks. So it is like each instance per rack. That is, each rack has its own the network and power. So what is it basically doing? When you have smaller number of instances but you want some better availability, right, to be protected from single points of failure, you can place it like this, right? You can have up to 7 instances. You can spread up to a maximum of 7 instances on the spread placement group, right? So it is recommended for applications which have smaller number of critical instances, which need to be kept on separate hardware. Okay, so it reduces the risk of simultaneous failures which might occur if they are sharing the same rack. It is just, you are just improving your chances of better uptime, okay, by spreading them across different hardware. Okay, and it can be across multiple availability zones, right, in the region, right? And you can have a maximum of 7 running instances per availability zone, per spread placement group. That is the limit, right? Maybe later they will increase, right? Again, if you are trying to launch an instance in the spread placement group, and you get insufficient hardware to fulfill the request, then you have to wait and try again. These are not guaranteed. Okay, it is just the best effort they try to place. So much you should know. But again, practical use, you might want to go through the rules and limitations. But for most of them, till here enough, right? So what are the placement groups? What happens if you get insufficient capacity error? Right? For the cluster, remember, you need to stop and start all machines, not reboot, to improve your chance of being able to launch another machine over there. Right? So again, there might be, what you say, supported instance types, unsupported instance types, right? All those are also certain factors. What is the instance type you are using, right? If it is not available, right? So for example, T2 is not there. So if you see, while I try to launch it, why it didn't come? Because I said T2, right? So which is why cluster is not there, right? And I say new placement group, I gave name, see cluster is not there. Why cluster is not there? Because the instance type was T2. Okay, so there will be some limitations, right, that we need to be aware of, or when we are using, if it is not working, why it is not working, because probably that instance type is not supported, or there is insufficient capacity, right? So now again, right, again it is not coming. Why it is not coming? Because I'm using T3. What is T family? I told you it is burstable instance performance, right? The T family is burstable performance, anything that starts with T. That is, it does not provide consistent CPU performance. That is only for the T family. I think I told you in the initial class. So we have to be aware of these things. In practically, you will end up with these kind of hiccups. In the exam, they will just ask you which placement group to use, or if you get a capacity error, what to do. Okay, so let me maybe choose something like M5 large. Right now, you see cluster is enabled. Right. So now, if I launch this machine M5 large, let me see whether we can see the failure. So I launched only one single instance, right? So while launching itself, you can say launch 2 machines or 3 machines or something like that here, right? So here, if I go to M5 large and then I say I'm choosing M5 XL, right? Now I'm saying put it in my same cluster placement group. Right? Now it launched, but sometimes it may not launch. Okay? Sometimes you will get capacity error that unfortunately I can't show you. It has to happen. Right? So ideally they say they recommend try to use the same instance types. Also try to launch them at the same time. Right? Those type of things. Okay? So these things. Right? So for cluster placement group you have some conditions. Right? Partition placement group, right, and for the spread placement. Okay, so how to create a placement group we just saw, right? Old console, new console, right? Some people have been saying I'm seeing different options, right? Well, the GUI looks slightly different because probably you are using the new EC2 experience. Okay, I prefer the old one because new one, it is a little troublesome for me because I'm used to taking my mouse automatically to certain places on the screen. Here they will change it around every now and then, they will keep switching it around. So I use the old EC2 experience. Okay, but it is the same thing, just the options will be here and there. They will look different. That's all. Don't worry about that. Okay, so which is why now in the document also they are giving new console and old console. Right? The option might be on the left or right, but it will be there somewhere. Okay. So that is about placement groups. That is the placement strategy for your instances. The default is you leave it to AWS to choose it for you. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions.
No, sir.
Status checks also we have a few more minutes. Whether any small thing we can talk about. Yeah, I forgot to tell you this. Probably the first thing I should have told you. Right. So, like I said, if you want to change the instance type, you can change it. I think I told you about this in the previous class, right? I think, right? So now this machine is T3 medium, this Windows machine, right? If I don't want T3 medium, I can change the instance type. But to change the instance type, you have to stop your machine. You can't do it while the machine is on, right? You can't change this while the machine is on. So you need to stop your machine, right? Once it comes to the stopping state, you can change the instance type. And then you can start it again. So how you will be built? You will be built for the new instance type from this hour onwards. That's why we say whenever you say start, it is a new hour. Because until now it was T3 medium. The next time I start, it might be T3 small or it might be T3 XL. It can be anything, right? So you can stop your machine and you can change the instance type. Inside your settings and everything will remain the same, right? So it is not just that you can upgrade only in the T family. From T3 you can go to M5 also, right? Whatever is the supported family. While launching the instance, you saw certain things grayed out, right? Those things you can't use, but any other thing you can go from one instance type to another instance type without changing any software or the network configuration. You can simply go to instance setting, change instance type. Now it is T3 medium. You can go smaller or you can go bigger, right? You can go smaller or bigger. I'm going smaller, T3 micro. I say apply. Now this is a T3 micro. Its IP remains the same, its instance ID remains the same, available, everything is same. It's just its hardware configuration has changed. Then you go actions, start. Now when I start, I will be built for T3 micro, not T3 medium. So remember, the pricing is not based on the number of machines, right? It is based on the instance type. So I would have been built for like 4 or 5 times I stopped and started, right? So maybe during this class I was built for 6 hours of T3 medium and maybe 1 hour of T3 small, right? But this entire thing is still the same machine. It is the same instance, right? At different points, it was using a different size. Initially, we started with T3 medium or something. Then we terminated that instance. Then we created this. Couple of times we stopped and started, right? So currently, the same instance which you are using, probably it has I think 2 hours of T3 medium and 1 hour of T2 small. But overall, if you see, we launched multiple instances and all that. So they will be clubbed together based on the instance type, not number of instances. Because your instance at any time it can be any instance type that you can change it, but everything else remains the same. Your IP software inside, everything else is the same. Okay.
And Siddharth, I have a query.
Yeah.
So it's regarding this gateway. Okay. So we have like IPv4 and IPv6, right?
Yes.
So is that term EIGW corresponds to only IPv4, IPv6?
Yes. Yes. Egress only.
So IPv4 can't. So IPv4 can't gel with the EIGW, right?
No, it can't.
Okay, okay. Because why I'm asking, like last week I found something in our office. Okay, so like people are telling that they're using this Egrix internet gateway for IPv4 actually. So maybe they may be wrong, or I don't know. Like,
See, which is why we
so
need
he
the
told that.
network. We need the network diagram, right?
Okay,
If you get the network diagram, like I said, with the VPC, right? Whoever is creating, or somebody else might have created, somebody else will be talking about it, right? So it is
okay,
better
right, right, right.
if we have the diagram, then we will know how they are doing the routing. But as
Correct.
far as I
So I
know,
told, yeah,
egress only gateway is, see, you should not get confused between internet gateway, egress only internet gateway, and the NAT gateway. In,
correct. Yeah.
in
So
internet,
yeah,
internet gateway will work with both IPv4 and v6.
correct, correct. Yeah, that's right. So I told him, I mean, no, it's not possible. Like, I mean, EIGW can gel with only IPv6. I'm sure about it like that. I told him. So he told he'll check and get back to me like that. Okay. So is there any identification, like, I mean, whether cross-checking in the console, like,
No, see, first of all,
about this?
see, let us open the diagram, right? So this is our VPC, right? So the egress
Yeah,
only internet gateway is like a NAT gateway for IPv6. It is not internet gateway
correct.
for IPv6. It is like a NAT gateway for IPv6. If you have an instance over here which is using IPv6, right, it cannot go through the NAT gateway. It needs egress only internet gateway. But if you have a IPv6 machine here, it can go out through the internet gateway. Okay? The egress only internet gateway is like a NAT gateway for IPv6 instances. But if your IPv6 is in the public subnet, it can go out through the regular internet gateway because the regular internet gateway supports both. So how you check
Yeah,
it is based on your diagram. Here, if you go to the VPC, right, like you said, you want to go to the VPC and you open it, right? Egress only internet gateway will be there. But what do you know? What is internet egress only internet gateway? You open the documentation. Simple. He wants EIGW, right? What is egress only internet gateway? Here itself it will give you, right? That allows outbound communication over IPv6 for your instances in your VPC to the internet. It prevents the internet from initiating connections to your instance. So basically, it is like NAT, right? Right? Is used for IPv6 traffic only. First line itself it is given,
correct.
right? So here only, I mean,
Yeah,
what are its properties? You get in the documentation. Here, you just create and use it. If it is not working, probably because of this limitation, right?
okay. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Maybe they got confused with the network diagram or whatever. So that is why always you show me the network diagram. If he's saying it is working, probably it is working through some other path and people got confused. So,
Okay, fine. Okay.
okay, so go ahead. If you have already some infrastructure, try to talk with those people, but don't argue. Basically, then next time they will not help. Okay. So you just see and just try to get the information. That's all. If you say you are wrong, means next time they will say don't come and ask. They will avoid you, right? So
Correct.
just try to get the information. If it is wrong, also you just double check in the documentation. That's all. Or you can
Okay.
ask me like this.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. So we'll catch up in the tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. And also, please let me know. Suppose like next week, any of the weekday, if you're free for a couple of hours, because I think we missed the class last week. Like maybe an hour or two, sometime during the weekday, 1 hour, maybe in the morning next week or something like that. If you are free.
Okay.
So tomorrow we'll have the class at the
Sure,
usual time.
sure.
Tomorrow we'll discuss about the coming week, maybe week, some day of the week, one day. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.